Rick Johnson to talk about Moonshot ideas.
So keeping in with the theme, we're going to talk about Kentucky moonshot ideas. And you saw the film earlier, and there are actually moonshot ideas happening right now. Things that aren't just 10% better, they're orders of magnitude better. You're not going to do anything if you don't believe in yourself. So it just starts right there. So if you don't believe in yourself and believe in your idea, you're not going to have a moonshot idea. If you do believe in yourself, you need to believe in yourself enough that you can overcome the obstacles. And what are they? People will tell you it's impossible. They'll tell you it's stupid. They'll tell you a lot of other things. The other thing that's always involved is hard work. So if you're not into hard work, it's not going to happen. But if you're doing something you love and you're passionate about, is it really work? Oh yeah, and then it takes time. You're not going to think of something this morning and then start doing it this afternoon. The final thing is you can't be something you're not. You have to be true to yourself. Don't try to be something that be true to yourself. Kentucky's rich with things that you can leverage. So I'm going to go back and tell you a story about where I grew up. That's a picture from in the 50s of where I grew up. Kind of looks more like Western Kentucky, doesn't it? So I had parents. There's debates about that a little bit, but so my mom went to school to be a nurse, and she actually worked in Johnson City, Tennessee. I'll tell people I was born in the hills west of there. She quit at the end of the war. She quit to ride her bicycle across Canada. So that's pretty adventurous. What did my dad do? The Navy put him through school. The war ended. He applied to graduate school. He got turned down. He spent a year networking. And then he got into graduate school. He went to graduate school, but he only got one offer, and he had to move out of state. So that sort of sounds like Kentucky again, doesn't it? You know, there's not really the network here. So it turns out, where I grew up actually wasn't Kentucky. There's a picture there. I'm going to come back to this. That's a picture in the 50s of some vacant land there. I'm going to show you what happened to that land a little bit later. But to really change things, to have a moonshot idea, I told you need to believe in yourself. It really, really helps to have community support, because you're not going to do it yourself. We heard that before. And so I talk about a point person or a point company. Somebody somewhere has to decide that I'm going to help this person, these people. Okay, where I grew up, the face of that change was a person by the name of Fred Turman. Okay, and there's a couple of companies he helped start. He didn't help start companies. He helped young people. They were typically engineers. That piece of land, the fourth bullet there, is now called Stanford Research Park. I point out that land, my dad, the job he took was actually 2,200 miles west of Johnson City, Tennessee, in Los Angeles. But 5 years later, when he had 5 kids under 5 years old, he quit his good-paying job with Hughes Aircraft and went to work for a startup, moved 500 miles north where he didn't know anybody, with this guy, Fred Turman, partnered him with another Stanford professor and a group of Kern County Land Company that had money and invested in them. And they opened their business at Stanford Research Park. They got a 99-year lease for some small amount of money. They ended up, the company was sold about 50 years after they started it, and I think they got $60 million for the remaining about 50 years on the land. Picture of Fred Turman, and a quote from him. So why would you help other people? Well, you help other people because it's a lot of fun. And that's really what I do now. And I do that under the banner of the Kentucky Innovation Network. And the people that know me know I'll help anybody, anywhere, anytime. So those companies today are in that Stanford Industrial Park, that piece of land that now is growing hugely in value. And anybody can do that. It takes time, it takes hard work, and it takes community support. So let me talk about your space shot companies, the ones that are really doing these many orders of magnitude things that are different. We've heard about Space Tango here today. And as Chris told you earlier, that really came from Kentucky Space, my shirt today with the logo on it, and the Exomedicine Institute. Those were both started, Chris could tell you the exact time, but they were started about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago with the CubeSat stuff with Ben Malferson here at Moorhead State. So it takes hard work and it does take time, but the payoffs are huge and you're already past the point of inflection in my point of view. And what's the big thing they're doing? They're manufacturing in microgravity. Chris talked about exomedicine, and that's really where the money is, but they're making fiber optic cable up there because fiber cable goes from a liquid to a solid. If you do that in microgravity, you have less settling, so you can get higher bandwidths on that cable. And Chris already showed you this picture of manufacturing in microgravity. And then we have the CubeSats and the Lunar CubeSat, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide. And I might not have the ice cube thing right, Ben, but this is actually a huge deal. So the video Chris showed under the Kennedy administration where we decided to go to the moon. This is going to be the first time we're going to go back to the moon since the 70s. The first time. Okay, and who's going back to the moon? Moorhead State, right? Moorhead State. When Ben talks, though, you got to ask him a few questions, okay? There he is, the rock star, on his 21-meter dish. So at Stanford, they have a dish, but their dish is no good because it's too noisy an environment. And here we're in an RF quiet zone. So you're going to talk to your CubeSats that are on the moon 250,000 miles away using this dish, right? But the thing you need to ask him, he's going to talk about the trip to the moon. Ask him, like if it was a cab and you were getting 25 cents a mile, ask him what the meter would be at when you get to the moon. That's the first question you have to ask him. And then the second question you have to ask him is, after it does its mission, he's going to tell you about the mission, but then where does the satellite end up? Somebody, when he asks for questions at the end, has to ask him those two questions. Okay, I'm luckily for you guys, I'm not going to use my all 15 minutes. So this is my last slide. But the state's going to a manufacturing trade show, and the Innovation Network is going to be one of the sponsors of that. And it's in Hanover, Germany. And so Toyota, advanced manufacturer, we're going to go to this show, and in Germany, there's going to be lots of technology around advanced manufacturing. So what is advanced manufacturing? In my simple mind, if you extrapolate that out, it's a factory that has no people in it, right? So the good jobs aren't working in a factory. It might be operating, programming, building, maintaining the equipment. But forget all that. With the state, what our position is, if you want to be at the forefront of manufacturing, if you want to be on the cutting edge, where the pioneers are going, all those roads actually lead through Kentucky. So I start out, so there's two reasons. The pictures on the right are tobacco plants. So what about a tobacco plant as a factory? Well, it's already happening. Remember the Ebola outbreak and the vaccine that came from Kentucky? Where was that vaccine manufactured? Oh, yeah, in Owensboro, but in a tobacco plant, right? It was in a tobacco plant. And so you don't need a building anymore. You can use a field, right, to manufacture your drugs. And these could be drugs that you crystallize proteins in microgravity. Why? Because they're much bigger. And that's what a lot of the drugs are now that'll fight diseases like AIDS and all. If you have a very, very much bigger molecule, it's easier to see if that's the right combination of proteins to actually be the drug. So people are going to be doing that in space, but then maybe they'll actually be manufactured once you figure out what the genome is or whatever. you manufacture it in a tobacco plant. And the other is manufacturing in microgravity, where we talked about Space Tango and doing these drugs, and we saw the picture. So Rick, Crazy Rick, the salesman, engineer turned salesman. So I reached out to DLR through connections I have with Ben Malfers here, and I told them all this stuff we were doing in space and asked them if they didn't want to come see us. I said, we were going to be in Germany, and Twyman was going to be there. I hadn't asked Twyman yet. I'm not sure I told Ben I was going to use his introduction for this. And they were impressed, and so they're going to be in Germany at this trade show to meet Space Tango. Airbus. So Airbus doesn't just build airplanes and fly airplanes. They fly payloads to the space station, and they're not happy with their current partner doing that. So they've decided to use Space Tango, and they're going to sign a contract with Space Tango. So now there's a reason why Twyman has to go to Germany. So we got him to delay his trip to be coincidental with this trade show. The head of Airbus found out, and he wants to be there with our governor, because they want to publicize this. So on Monday or Tuesday, the 25th or 26th of this month, the head of payloads of Airbus and Space Tango are going to be with Matt Bevan, and they're going to sign a contract with them. Big things are happening here, and they understand that globally, okay? They understand that all roads to this new era, or to these new eras of manufacturing, come through Kentucky. Okay, and there's one other person. So we pitched this. So a lot of states are going to be showing at this at the USA booth at this manufacturing trade show. So the White House, staffers at the White House asked the states that are going there, tell us why the president should stop by and visit your booth. So again, Rick said, well, you need to be there because everybody else is going to be there. The head of DLR, the head of Airbus, because they really, really are interested in all this advanced manufacturing that's going on in Kentucky, and not advanced manufacturing like you thought of, but it's manufacturing in microgravity. And so the president's office agreed. They're going to stop by Monday, April 25th, the Kentucky booth, to hear about all the neat things that are happening in manufacturing in the state of Kentucky. And they're going to do that in Hanover, Germany. And the CEO of DLR is going to be there, and the Airbus head of payloads are going to be there, and Twyman Clements is going to be there.
Thank you, Rick. I think that since we've talked so much about Space Tango, I probably should explain a little bit of what Space Tango is and does. Space Tango designs and builds hardware and software platforms that enable microgravity research and manufacturing. I know that that's a mouthful, but in essence, our first product is called the Tango Lab 1. And it is a lab platform that allows multiple cube labs, about the size of a CubeSat, to run simultaneously, 21 to be exact. And so we are increasing the amount of high throughput research that can be done on the International Space Station. But on top of that, we've also built the software systems that allows for the data to be extracted from the experiments and sent back down to Earth via the internet and be presented in a user interface on the web. So just like you were tracking your UPS package from point A to point B, you can now track your experiment that is happening on the International Space Station. That's the first product of many products that we are trying to develop that could end up being that exomedicine hospital that you got to see in Chris's presentation earlier. So hopefully one day we will all be getting treatment for anything that happens in space. Thank you, Ben. It's quite amazing that satellites, they started off really small, and then they got really, really, really big. And then with Bob Twiggs, Dr. Twiggs, who's in here, I think, right there, he invented with another guy this thing called a CubeSat. A 1U CubeSat is a 4-inch cube. So think of a small tissue box. You know, those cube tissue boxes. A 2U cube is like the longer tissue box. All right, so these are units of cube satellites. They're the size of the CubeSat, and they're also the size of the experiments in my company's lab. A 4-inch cube is a 1U. So the Lunar Ice Cube satellite is a 6U. So think of a men's shoebox. That is the size of the satellite that is going to the moon. Well, this is crazy because that is really tiny. And then he talked about propulsion systems and cameras, and this thing is loaded with equipment and gear. Well, none of that would be possible without nanotechnology. And nanotechnology is something that Kentucky is also a leader in. How does that work out nice? So all we have to do to go to one of the leaders in technology in the country is go to U of L.